sand sing softly, whispers in the Nile breeze. Pharaohs rest in dreams, eternal melodies freeze. Stars shine ancient light, temples glow in the night. Scarabs dance in flight.
Vitiligo was a common affliction in one family in what later became Nigeria. Those who showed signs of a loss of pigmentation were taken to work in the temple, become servants of the gods, and accorded the status of royalty. The individuals who filled this role had a level of compassion, interspersed with the intuition to know what to say or do for any malady or mediation, that the stories about them eventually extended through most of the ancient world, from Araby to Cella, Anoxus to Palmyra. Melody Cormick, Inscrito.
Tremaine asked her something. Antiochus asked Liorana the same thing, something indecipherable. The two brothers looked at each other and Shania sensed they were frustrated by the language barrier. Tremaine glanced over at his uncle and said something to him. His uncle responded, and pointed to where two people were arriving, slightly out of breath. Shania was relieved to see Kedrick's familiar face. They would understand much better with his translations to help them. By his side was a Nubian. To Shania's discerning eye, this girl was of royal lineage. She had the mark of favor, a jagged slash of light skin and hair on the face to mark a person as touched by the gods or favored by them. On this girl, the mark began under her left eye, crossed through the iris of her eye, through her eyelashes and eyebrow, and continued up into her hair. The effect was dramatic. Most of her skin was black as night, but within the slash it was cream-colored. Her eyes had distinct dark fathomless ebony irises, but the mark of favor left a streak of green. Where the slash met her lashes, eyebrow and her tightly curled ebony hair, the black was transformed to a rich red. The beautiful Nubian came up to Shania and spoke to her in the language she learned as a child, before she was sold to the strange blonde northern beauty and her father. She was instantly transformed to the dusty pyramids, the rich smell of fertile Nile River soil, livestock, and the rich diversity of sounds that came from the musicians. She longed, for just a moment, to return to the desert oasis of her youth. But there was much that was dark in her past, and her current glorious surroundings exercised a greater pull on her heart.
I am Safiya, and I have been brought so you will understand everything that happens on this night with great clarity. If you agree, Kedrick and I will remain here in the palace for the next year. I will help serve your needs, while Kedrick undertakes the elder year of study in the temple.
Shania wasn't sure she wanted anyone to be her servant. She didn't wish to offend the woman, so she said simply,
"Thank you."
It was ludicrous to think this woman would be anyone's servant. Rialto spoke to them and then paused, to wait for the translation. First Kedrick spoke to Liorana, and then Sophia interpreted for Shania.
The keeper asks if you experience happiness here within our land.
The way Sophia phrased the question reflected her feelings. She was experiencing happiness to be in Estolia and, more importantly, to be in his arms.
I have never known a greater happiness than I know now.
She responded in her native language, keeping her eyes on Tremaine. Sophia spoke to Rialto, no doubt translating her words. Once both Sophia and Kedrick finished, Rolando stepped forward and turned to Liorana to speak. Shania was grateful when Sophia stepped close enough so she could unobtrusively interpret for her while they talked.
Liorana, my son believes you will make a superb queen of Estolia and asks if you will consent to be his lady.
Sophia whispered the king's words into Shania's ear. Liorana looked up at Antiochus. The answer did not need any translation. He leaned forward and kissed her, and then he looked from Liorana to Tremaine. Rialto spoke next, translated rapidly by Sophia.
And you, Shania, my nephew, is convinced you are a woman of great character, great intellect, and that there is no other woman better equipped to keep his soul safe. He asks if you are willing to stay with him throughout his life as his exclusively, willing to bear his children and hold him close for all the days of your life. Do you consent to this?
Shania looked up into Tremaine's beautiful expressive eyes. Like with Liorana, She didn't need to speak for him to know her answer.
There are 2 chambers prepared in the depths of the temple. Will you go there tonight, now, to consummate the union you have agreed to enter?
The king spoke again via translation. Shania looked over at Liorana and saw agreement in her eyes. She then looked up at the man who was, if she could believe it, asking her to marry him. Tremaine took her hand and led her out of the large gathering hall. Antiochus and Liorana followed them closely. Outside, the full moon was already high in the sky and the sun had long since set. The fall air was crisp. In the courtyard, 2 chariots waited, one with 2 white horses, the other with 3 darker-colored steeds. Shania watched Antiochus guide Liorana into the chariot with 2 horses. He stepped up behind her, holding her close with one hand, gripping the edge of the chariot with the other. Kedrix stepped up onto the chariot to expertly guide the horses to their destination. Once the first chariot left, Shania was directed to the second chariot, a larger vehicle than the first, pulled by 3 horses. When she saw it was the small giant responsible for getting them to the temple safely, she understood both the size of the chariot and the need for 3 horses. She stepped up onto the platform and felt Tremaine's arms come around her. In minutes, they were traveling, by moonlight, to the temple. Tremaine spoke to her and she wished she could understand him, but it was nice to hear him speaking to her, his breath on her ear, the warmth of his body pressing against her. The trip seemed quick, with the horses going quite fast on the well-maintained road. When the large man guiding their chariot slowed the horses, she saw the other chariot was already being moved away from the entrance. Tremaine helped her down once they came to a stop. With a brief couple of words for the giant, he turned with her and led her up the steps to the impressive entrance. 2 young men held the doors open for them. Once inside the building, she barely had time to look around. Tremaine was leading her across a large hall to another set of double doors being held open for them. Her senses were overwhelmed with the wealth and beauty of the surroundings. They walked through an amphitheater of sorts, and through a third set of doors. The hall they entered seemed vast, but the only thing Shania focused on was the familiar sight of Liorana, standing with Antiochus. They crossed the hall so the 2 brothers could speak to one another and grip forearms before embracing. The men separated. Tremaine led her down the hall to the left, around a curve, stopping at a final set of double doors. One of the 2 young men who accompanied them this far moved forward to open the door for them. They slipped through and then the door was closed, leaving them alone together.
In the Nile's warm miles, legends reconcile. Whispers echo low, through pyramids they flow. Timeless tales they know, secrets of long ago.